Good morning, everybody. Good morning, councillors, and welcome to this morning's meeting of the Licensing and Regulatory Committee. Any apologies, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, we have apologies from Councillor Martin Darcy and Councillor Jackie Keane.
Thank you very much. Any declarations of interest?
None received prior to the meeting, Chairman.
Thank you. The minutes of the meetings held on the 23rd of May 2022, it was a long time ago, published on the website. Are they agreed? Thank you. Questions from members of the public?
None received, Chairman.
Thank you. And questions from members?
None received, Chairman.
Actions authorised. I don't think there's been anything. Not that I've not agreed anything anyway, so one would assume there hasn't, but one never knows. Thank you. Right, we'll move on then to the part one items. There's two items. It's been suggested that we take the fees first. If you'd like to lead on that, then please. Item 8, which is fees, pages 55 to 64. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to introduce myself to the committee, because I'm not sure if everyone is familiar with my face. My name is Rosie Plaistow-Mellom. I'm a Financial Services Manager here at Waverley, and I've been working through the budget over the last few months. And this is one of the steps in setting the Council's budget. So in front of you today, we've got the licensing budget report, which sets out the proposed fees and charges for some of our key licenses, well, in fact, all our licenses that the council is proposing for 23-24 financial year. These fees must be set at a break-even position in legislation. A number of these fees anyway must be set at break-even. We cannot make a surplus on these, but equally we should be recovering our costs where possible. They are subject to consultation for the license, the taxi fares and private hire, thank you, are subject to consultation with those that are purchasing the licenses. And so this is kind of the first step in that consultation process. Following this meeting today, Paul Hughes, our licensing manager, will be putting this document out to consultation. And that will take some period to be consulted on, and those responses will then be provided back to this committee before a second consideration stage. The fees that are in front of you are generally uplifted by inflation. You will see in Annex 3, the inflation rate applied has been the kind of corporate inflation position that we've taken this financial year. It's around 9%, allowing for rounding. So where fees and charges have been rounded to what we've considered a sensible number, you might see some variations on that 9% up and down, depending, just to make sure we're not charging customers the odd pence. So the main cost for this service is staff time, which we are just, I believe, just agreed a staff pay increase, which actually does vary across the different grades, but the average is around the 8 or 9%. It was set on a CPI assumption in September of 8.6%. So that's why the 9% fee increase position has been proposed. So subject to this committee, that consultation, a report will come back to review the consultation responses, and then the document will then have to travel back to council before the fees and charges are finally approved. I'm happy to take any questions or add any more detail, but I don't want to take up too much of your time. So yeah, I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Munro.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'm happy with this general principle. It seems right and proper. I noticed from the budget papers, so if I read them correctly, we are recovering about 4/5 or thereabouts of the charges, and there is therefore a small charge payable by the general taxpayer. Did I get that more or less right? And I don't think that, frankly, is anything to worry about, although we do want to recover all the costs. But is there an ambition for next year? I'm not suggesting the charges go up for full cost recovery. It was 9% seems to be about the upper limit. But is there an ambition for next year to do what we can actually to have full cost recovery?
So there is an element that is the enforcement part of this budget that we are unable to recover. That represents around 10% of the costs. So yes, we do have capacity within the break-even legislation to increase costs further. We will be undertaking a review, as we do every year, to try and reach that break-even point where we can recover as much as possible, but also identifying the difficulties that our licensees have in covering these costs as part of their businesses. But yes, we do have potentially some capacity, and in addition, we will be looking to minimise costs where possible, as well, as we always do. Paul and I meet and meet with my team as well to try and review where manoeuvrability is to minimise costs as much as maximise the income.
Thank you. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chair. This might be something that Mr. Hughes might help answer. On page 62, I'm just wondering at the top there, whether these costs for cosmetic piercing, electrolysis, acupuncture are all inclusive of whatever happens in these beauty places, or whether or not things like Botox, because that's injections, might not be included. That's my question. Thank you.
Unfortunately, I can't help you out because this side of the licensing comes under environmental health, and the other side of it is I don't frequent those places.
I don't use those places either.
Can you help with that at all?
I'm afraid I'm not completely familiar with that area, but I'm happy to take that away and feedback if that's helpful.
Thank you. Councillor Davison.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm very much with the others' overall agreement with what's being proposed. I have a question, though, more for my clarification. Is there any attempt made to apportion other overhead costs to the recoveries?
If I may, Chair. So when you are looking at particularly Annex 1 or 2, you will see in there a recharge expenditure line within there about midway through, and that is the support cost. So that is partially the recharge of the licensing team time, but it also does cover overhead costs such as finance time, legal support, a number of different teams within the building, and it does also cover, for example, IT and those types of costs. So where appropriate, we will apply recharges to make sure the full cost of running the service is included in here. And again, that is something that we will review each year to make sure we are representing it as appropriately as possible. And actually, this is an area where it is possible, alongside the collaboration and business transformation projects, we may see reductions in coming years and actually allow us to potentially minimise the increases in these fees and charges.
It's good to hear that. Thank you.
Councillor James.
Thank you, Chairman. On the last page, 64, under Licensing Act, everything is hardly any increase at all. But on the premises licence, it says it's various depending on the rateable value. Is there going to be a no increase in that? Or is there going to be a 9% or 7%? Should we not know now? It would be awful if suddenly it was 13% and none of us agreed that. Should we not fix a maximum rise? Thank you, Chairman.
All the licensing fees are mandatory on the Licensing Act side of it, so they're set by government. So we don't have, where it says they're variable, it depends on the rateable value of each premises. So there's a set table, and if you fall into band A, which is a certain value, you pay this amount, and they're all set by government. So there's no change on those.
Thank you. Councillor Hyman.
Thanks. Sorry, I must apologise. I couldn't find any parking space outside. Been very busy in that car park. Need to do something about that, I think. It looks to me like it's 14% rise or something like that in the recharge expenditure. A lot of money, a lot greater than inflation or anything else, or staff pay rises even. So I'm very concerned that that's really pumping things up, and obviously it's also a great concern that we are really driving inflation by putting up all our charges by the amount of money. But you know, if they're set centrally by government, and the government's telling us that we've got to put them up by 8.6 to 9%, then that's what we've got to do. It just means that that'll be reflected in the prices that people pay in the pubs and establishments in future, and people will want pay rises so that they can still afford to go to the pub, and it just becomes a vicious circle of ever increasing inflation. So we've got to try and hold ourselves back. My concern, page 61, we don't have any evidence. I know you've touched upon it. We don't have any evidence that the break-even fees equate to the actual costs. You know, we have to very much have to take all of this on trust in the budget. We're told that this is, you know, it's the actual costs, it's break-even. These are, you know, very much administrative amounts of money, or they are, you know, centrally set amounts of money, it seems. So what sort of assurance do we have as councillors that these fees do equate to the actual cost, that it is actually a break even? Because, you know, I appreciate that's got to be approximate. Obviously it's not perfect, but how do we know? Because we're agreeing to this, and it's totally on trust, and obviously we know it's not true entirely. So the other, just a matter of detail probably, really, but at 10.3 on page 57, it says at the top, legal, 10.3 is legal. It says that the annual responsibility of full council to approve the budget and set the council tax. We know that. It refers to Constitution Part 3B 67 on page 40. It's not there. It's a completely different place where it mentions things like budget and whatever. So could we just make sure that things are checked before they are put into as though they were true last year, so they must be now? That's nowhere near the case. If you want, where I found it was in table 1, which is not a table, true to form, table 1, page 44, and points Roman numbers 10 and 11. So X and XI is where I think you'll find them. So that's page 44. Okay. But yeah, if you can just touch on the taking this data on the costs on trust. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, noted on 10.3, we'll take that one away. And so the fees and charges are a combination of calculations on staff time and allocations of other costs. I guess the only evidence that we can provide within these papers are Annex 1 and Annex 2, where we're showing each different type of variety of licenses broken down in there. The Hackney carriage is the key one for us to look at, I guess, this today, and how we are actually not recovering the full cost. So that column there is showing actually we're recovering only about 75% of costs. So there is room to actually recover more within the legislation potentially.
Is that why we've got, because on the very last page, 64, I'm sure others noticed that in the middle of that page, we've got increases of 16.5% in the cost of changing the address of a taxi driver or replacing their badge. I mean, obviously, those are just ridiculous increases, far beyond inflation and the cost of a bracket for a replacement badge. In the greater plan of things, perhaps the greater scheme of things, that 16.5% of a small amount of money isn't an enormous amount of money, but nevertheless, those are, I just, you know, when you look at those sorts of numbers of what we're putting our prices up by, I think, crikey, what's inflation going to be next year?
Absolutely. So yes, so the 9% has been the general, and what you are seeing there in the 16.5 and the 12% is where we've applied the 9% assumption and then rounded to what has been seen as a sensible charge, which is why some of the increases are more than the 9% and some are a little less than the 9%. So we've rounded to minimize the pence, etc. But yes, understandable that does look quite remarkable in comparison to the rest.
Thank you. Any other colleagues wish to say anything? No? So, are we agreed to let this, as it stands, go to consultation? Agreed, thank you. Councillor Davison has been agreed, but it's okay.
I must have dozed off. Thank you very much for going through the charges. I hadn't realized that we were also going through we've also already covered the statement of licensing policy. We haven't, okay, we're going back to that. Oh,
we took that first because I was asked to.
Okay, fine,
thank you. So that is agreed. Thank you very much. Mr. Hughes.
Yes, Chairman, just to mention with the fees, because of the way the meetings fall for the council and the licensing regulatory committee, the next available one after we've advertised is the 5th of June, and then it would be the 18th of July for council. So there is a time involved, and because we have to do the advert within a certain amount of days of when the date for the fees to come out, which we need to work out now, you might not see these fees for a little bit yet until they're advertised. So they're not going to go in the paper next week at this rate.
Thank you very much. Yes, as Councillor Ward says, none of us may be here then. Not wanting to be. Thank you very much. Okay, we will now deal with item 7, and I can assure Councillor Davison you didn't sleep through it. So this is to approve for consultation. Again, this is for consultation. The draft statement of licensing policy is set out on pages 5 to 54 of your agenda, and this is again a legal requirement that every so often we review these things, and I'll ask Mr. Hughes to introduce it and go through for us the major changes, because a lot of it is exactly the same as before. So,
Chairman, may I just before we start, it says in here that we've got track changes, that it's in different colours, and there aren't any, so we're unaware of the changes, and having spent hours reading it, it's a bit difficult to know what the changes are. So how can we have that pointed out to us? And I also looked online to see if it was in colour on the electronic version, and it isn't.
Thank you, Chairman. Through you, all members were sent an email with the document with the track changes on it, because it wasn't noted till after I'd sent the agenda out that I'd actually sent I'd sent out the document that had not got the track changes on. So I did actually send an email to all members with the one with track changes on so that they could compare.
thank you, Mr. Hughes. If you would, as I say, introduce it and highlight the major ones. As I say, it's very much similar to last time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, as you said, it's a statutory requirement that we have a policy, a statement of licensing policy, and that we review it every 5 years. The last review was in 2018. As you said, there's a copy of the draft report attached with track changes showing. The review must include a public consultation, which we are planning on an 11-week consultation between the 3rd of March and the 19th of May, and we'll bring back any comments received to this committee for consideration on the 5th of June 2023. Regarding changes, most of them are just matters of tidying up, and as far as tidying up, the formatting will be done at the end, because when you're doing changes, it's hard to see. So once we accept all the changes or make any further ones from your comments today, then we'll get it all formatted before we go out to consultation. Just going to go through the policy itself for the changes. So there was initially some changes just to the current census, because that was updated with the population on 1.2 and 1.3 in the introduction policy. We then refer to the statement of licensing and the amended guidance. There's been a new guidance, statement of licensing guidance act came out in December 2022. So that's an amendment in the policy. Other changes are we've added a paragraph on 6.39, which is just to make comment to spiking, sexual harassment and effective CCTV, again from government guidance. We've just made, with the early morning restriction order and the MROs and the late night levy, there was just some added word in there to try and make it clearer what they are. Again, then on 7.3, there's a nighttime safety, just a paragraph there about nighttime safety. In 16.7, we just make it clear that it's environmental health and the police that can object to a 10. Just clarification there. And majority of the others are just updated of addresses, codes of practice, etc., or where we've put a link to certain documents. But apart from that, it's generally much the same as it was before.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, Councillor Davison.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a minor observation. We have a statement of licensing policy. This is just purely for premises and events. What we call the licensing policy for vehicles? Should we be calling this the statement of licensing of premises and events licensing policy? Just to clarify to somebody else looking on the website at our policy documents.
It's the Licensing Act refers to it as the statement of licensing policy. Our taxis and our private hires, it's called the Hackney Carriage and Private Hire Policy, which is separate.
Okay. One other point, if I may. Is it possible? We got a list at the end, but I got 2 more points. A list at the end of references, which would be useful to anybody looking at the policy. Would it be useful to include links to our other documents associated with licensing? We have various forms which we which applicants for licenses need to use?
Oh, what, with regard to the application forms
Yes.
for licensing, it's possible we could do links, we could possibly do links to
Or-
them on, if they on an
Or just have
electronic.
a reference, go back to the website and a particular area of the website where to look for.
Yeah,
these
because we
things.
have all the
Yeah,
links
I
on
think it
the
would be
website.
helpful to get as guidance. And one more question, if you will forbear with me, Chairman, is that we've had difficulty in the past with dealing with publicans who have not had, or appear not to have had adequate CCTV and safeguarding instruments in place, or peoples in place. Is there, I can't remember seeing in this document sufficient guidance as to what these should be, or a reference to what these should be. For example, adequate CCTV coverage and equipment to record it, and for how long. Similarly with the necessity for dealing with rowdiness in these licensed establishments, either a bouncer at the gate kind of thing, or whatever. Do we have references to that somewhere, or is there some guidance which will actually spell that out?
In the policy, it talks about crime and disorder, public safety, public nuisance, and under crime and disorder, there's one there that talks about CCTV. But these sort of things are just sort of like, they don't have to have them, and the Act says that you can't have blanket statements that all our pubs will have CCTV, because they have to be judged on their own merits and reasons for it, why it's required. So these are sort of things that we ask them to look at the policy to help guide them. But when an applicant makes an application to us, if we don't receive an objection, then it won't come to you, and we have no control on it. The law states that it gets granted. So if a publican doesn't put CCTV down there, or any other policies that we would ideally like, but nobody objected to the application, he would be granted the application as he applied for it.
And the police, do they make a thorough check, or?
The police will, as part, because they see they're a relevant authority and they see the application, and that's when their job is to, they'll look at the application and think, well, I think it needs CCTV and I want this CCTV in it. And they generally have, there's a set format that they ask for. There's some wording they generally send out when they want CCTV, saying that they want all the entrance areas covered, all the public areas covered, that it must record for 31 days, etc., etc., and that police and council can have access to the recordings.
No criticism of you and your team, but I have a sense that the police may do a little bit of checkboxing.
Yeah, generally they'll speak to the client, and they may say, well, if you don't put it on, we'll object, and then it will come to committee, and it will be for the committee to decide whether they have that condition or not.
Thank you. Councillor Munro.
Thanks very much, Chairman. Just one point, and I see one of the cornerstones of the policy is protection of children from harm, which is quite right and proper. I wonder, however, should we consider actually extending that not just to children, but to vulnerable people in general? I know it's not covered explicitly in the Act, but should Waverley be a bit more proactive and explicitly stating that one of our jobs is to prevent vulnerable people of all sorts coming from harm as well? But you might say, oh, well, that's covered elsewhere, or it's implicit there. So I'd be grateful for your comments.
I think generally it would fall in all of the licensing objectives, particularly vulnerable people, but all weakens the law states, and Gillian can probably correct me on this, but the law states that it's the 4 licensing objectives that we work on. But I do think, although it doesn't mention vulnerable people itself, it does talk about children. I do think that vulnerable people would fall under the crime disorder, because if you were treating someone badly, that it might fall under crime disorder. So do think it works to that. And also that you've got things like the guidance where we've added Ask Angela, things like that, where people can approach SPA staff and ask for Angela when they feel that there's an issue.
Could I come back? Could I suggest that there is somewhere that vulnerable people are mentioned explicitly, and it, if nothing else, it shows that this council's support for vulnerable people in a way that perhaps this policy doesn't. I accept that within the policy there are and the and how it works in practice. Of course, vulnerable people are given special consideration, again, rightly. But why, if that is the case, why not actually explicitly state it somewhere? I'm not going to propose a set of words that can be taken away, because, as you say, we're at the start of the consultation process. But that's my general proposal, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Gillian, those 4 objections are out of the Act, I take it.
Yes, as Paul Hughes has indicated there, prevention of crime, public disorder, public safety and protection of children from harm. So they're specified in the legislation, well-known concepts that are addressed within the guidance issued by the Home Office under section 182. But in a similar way, Mr. Hughes has already expressed there are aspects within the policy document to address possible harm to those that are vulnerable, but there's no reason why there couldn't be a safeguarding heading or focus on vulnerable individuals. That could certainly be added. I didn't see there any difficulty with that concept.
The word safeguarding is a very useful word, and I'm glad you've mentioned it, which I didn't. Yeah.
Thank you. Would we?
There is a referral in the policy regarding the safeguarding policy.
Thank you. Perhaps a couple of words, Mr. Hughes, could be in there about particularly vulnerable people or something like that. If we could do that before we go out. I think Councillor James.
Yes, Mr. Hughes, is probably in a government policy, but on page 20, where it A, B, C, all the way down, their performances, 500 people, some of them say indoor or outdoor, but showing of a film doesn't stipulate whether it's indoor, outdoor, or how many people. So do you require a license? Presumably, if I wanted a drive-in, in a big field with a big screen to watch Mamma Mia or something, would there be, no more than 500 cars with 1 occupant each?
As far as it's on person, so it would include, so if you had 5 people in a car, that would be 5 persons, not 1 car worth, and the total amount of people. But for showing a film is licensable. It's not a live feed. If it was a live feed on television, that's okay. But if it was a film that you've recorded earlier or one from the cinema, that requires licensing. So I'm not sure on that one, but with whether you're getting with the temporary event notices, because temporary event notices are 499 people, that's separate. And there's just some of the on that list there where it's got different sorts of regulated entertainment. They do talk about when it becomes licensable and not, with the 500 people side of it.
Through you, Chairman, that's what I was querying, because most of them you have a maximum number of people, but on showing a film, as I said, there were 5 people in each car, and you had 100 cars. You mean, that's a lot of people.
That would require licensing.
And it would. So there isn't a maximum or a minimum.
Not on the showing of films. It talks about it on the ones it's got maximum, minimum ones.
Right.
They're mentioned.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Hyman.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got a lot of reservations here, simply because we're being asked to agree to allow it to go to consultation before the formatting and tidying up. We've got an unfinished document. with a lot of mistakes all throughout. We've got formatting, typos, repetitions, misnumbering of paragraphs, all sorts of problems with it. Links, link names, it's a lot of stuff that that can be improved. And we state in there on page 16 that this document at the top, it tells us that it's going to include a short high-level summary of what we're committed to or what our aims are. It also says that a document improvement. The council welcomes comments and feedback on its policies and procedures. Please contact the name of the document author and their department or team or whatever if you've got any comments. And I would like to very much ensure that before this goes out to consultation, we're not going to force everybody that we send it to read and go through it in the way that I have, marking up every bit that needs changing on there. I've simply, why have we got a document in front of us that's unfinished, that hasn't been formatted, that we're meant to say, yeah, it's okay to go out when, I mean, even the authors know it isn't, or I assume they know. It's got lots of bits and pieces in there. But particularly concerned about also the difficulty for people to understand it. It's all right for us if we're sat there and we've got a couple of hours to read through it and try and work out exactly what it's saying. But, for instance, the deregulation, it's on page 20, where it tells us about the 2012 and 2015 deregulation. I've found it really, really difficult to try and work out how it had been deregulated and how it affected people, because that's what people need to understand in pretty plain English. I mean, to me, it looks like the deregulation was that things are no longer licensable when they're on licensed premises during normal hours of not 11 p.m. to 8 a.m. therefore, and when there's less than 500 people. That's sort of like, to me, a fairly simple way. But this gives us 5 bullet points that are almost impossible to untangle. So, I really think we've got work to do on this before it goes out. I fully appreciate that most of the stuff in here actually goes right back to 2004 or 2000, and some of it probably has never been read by anybody since. And I thought it's about time people did read it properly and go through it before it goes out, so that all the people that we send it to at least don't think that we haven't bothered thinking first. I'd like it. I'm happy to give my marked up version to officers so that they can have a look and go through and do all the stuff if they haven't looked for it themselves. But I mean, even our recommendation in front of us, look, if you go to the page of our recommendation, I don't know why, we have a problem with numbering systems at this council now, it appears. It's obviously not our office's fault. If you go to paragraph 4 on page 7, 4.1, the committee is a resolution, we're asked to resolve that, and then it jumps to 5.1.1, and then afterwards we go back to 5, and then we go up to 5.1, and then the 5.1.1 we've already had, isn't there? I mean, what's going wrong with numbers? The whole thing has got numbering problems. The list that we've got at the very end that has already been referred to with the links, it just looks appalling, as though nobody actually bothered looking at it after that. It's jumped, everything, all the text has jumped around, and it's our systems, I assume, not the person who wrote it. So I never blame the person who wrote it, because we can't see the mistakes when we write stuff. People are busy, write stuff, we can't see it. Someone else has got to check it.
I think you've got.
But I can't agree with this in the format that it is, unless I have a version put in front of me. Unfortunately, I didn't receive the email, and I still haven't received an email. I don't know what's wrong with my iPad, but I've no idea what the changes were, so I'm blind on that. But the whole document, I really can't support putting it out in 3 days' time and whatever it is without knowing that the stuff in here is going to be sorted. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I think some of the remarks you make regarding the deregulation is probably a straight lift from the government right of it, and we're not in a position to change that. It's not our interpretation, it's what the Act says. But can you deal with the other points, Mr. Hughes, please?
Yeah, as far as the numbering and the formatting goes, it's just difficult to leave the track changes in. There's page breaks, there's numbers, and depending on how how the computer, because you move desks and how some are set up when you bring it up, sometimes it's showing the track changes in front of you. Sometimes it's just comments on the side and you can see the line, but you can't see if you've changed it or not. And then you go back into it and think you haven't changed it and you have changed it, and it just keeps swapping. So it is, and that's why I've said once, because I wanted you to see the track changes and why, once you've accepted the track changes as such, then I could accept the policy, all the track changes, and then the formatting, you can go through the numbering to make sure that's all right, and the page breaks are in the right place, and I can get somebody to double check that's all right. And I'm quite happy. I'd be pleased, in fact, to take your comments with your form and make sure that those are all taken into account.
Thank you very much. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chair. At the beginning, the purpose and summary to approve for consultation the draft statement of licensing policy. It's a draft. And I agree with the Chair, this, and with Councillor and with Mr. Hughes, that basically we're taking in so much information, which includes government information, local changes, and to get all that in is the process, and this is what we're looking at. And you know, this is not the finished article, and we are part of making that a finished document. And I thank all the people in licensing for their hard work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hyman.
I think Councillor is misunderstood actually what I was saying. We've got a document in front of us which we are approving to go to consultation as a draft. I know that, so you don't need to tell me it's a draft because that's what it is, right? But we're approving it to go to consultation. So we're saying that this document is fit to be consulted upon and sent to all the people who have got to spend a long time reading through it and giving us their views on it. And what I'm saying is it isn't finished, and that's a fact. There's a page there that tells us it isn't finished, there's a load more to do. And I'm saying that we shouldn't be approving things blind. I've said, I know, I'm not criticising Paul for the hassle he's got with hot desking and all this stuff. I know what the problems are with writing stuff. And when you read it yourself, if you write stuff yourself, you know that your eyes can't see the problems with it. It's the way our brains work. You have to have somebody else check it, don't you? And after you've done your work, I'm just saying, look, I think we've been given a timetable in here of what, March the 3rd, is it? 3 days away or something like that, that this is going to go out. I am not confident that, given that this started in 2019, according to the pages which give us the document control, that this was sorted in 2019 as a version. It's now nearly 4 years on, presumably, right, that it's in front of us and no one's read it. Now, you know, if you as members think this is perfectly okay, you may have skimmed through it with your eyes, but have you actually read it? Because that's what we're asking other people to do. We're saying to the people who this affects, people who are asking for licenses, read this document. We're making it say,
Yeah,
right
I think
read it. It's got to be legible.
I think you're repeating yourself, and we have heard your view on that. So we're in a position now. Anyone else wish to speak? No. Well, the recommendation is that we approve for consultation the draft statement of licensing policy. I would suggest that perhaps the Vice Chairman and myself see the finished document before it goes out, so that the things that Mr. Hyman has said can be checked and that it is readable. Is that acceptable to the committee? Is that agreed? Thank you very much.
May I see that too, Chairman?
If you
Because
wish.
I've been through it. I don't know whether anybody else has, but I know what to look for.
Yes, I think most of the committee will have read it, and more than once. Thank you very much. Part 2 matters are the licensing and general purpose subcommittees A, B and C to approve the minutes. I'm not happy with that one. It should not be to note, because I don't think we can overturn those semi-judicial decisions.
I agree, Chairman, because as members will note, I didn't actually attach the minutes as I usually do. Reason being that the majority of them are so long ago that they've been approved through council and through meetings afterwards. So that there was, you know, I didn't see the point of us actually, so I do agree, Chairman. I think it should be more to note than to approve.
Yes, if we could certainly do that. And I think perhaps we should look whether this should happen in the future, because I don't think either the council or the full committee can overturn the decision. So I think it's just a noting item. So although it's not here, can we note those, please?
Yes, Chairman.
Thank you. That concludes the business of the meeting, and thank you all for attending. Thank you.